Vincent Marcello had built his empire on reading people. 52 years of life, 35 of them navigating a world where misreading someone's character could cost you everything, had taught him that true nature revealed itself not in boardrooms or negotiations, but in how you treated someone who couldn't help or hurt you. That's why he stood in the bathroom of a private medical facility at 5 in the morning, watching a makeup artist transform him into someone society had learned to ignore. "Hold still," Maria murmured, applying another layer of foundation that added years and hardship to his face. She'd worked in Hollywood before Vincent had recruited her, and her skill was such that even he barely recognized himself in the mirror. The expensive Italian suit was gone, replaced with paint-stained work clothes purchased from a thrift store the previous day. Stained, worn, the kind that made people look away. His head of security, Marco, watched from the doorway with barely concealed concern. They'd worked together for 15 years, and Marco had seen Vincent do dangerous things, but this always made him uncomfortable. "You don't have to do this yourself," Marco said, not for the first time. "We could send someone undercover, get the same information." "No." Vincent's voice was firm as Maria worked on his hands, adding dirt under the nails, creating calluses that looked decades old. "I need to feel it. Need to see their eyes when they decide I don't matter, when they look at me and see a problem instead of a person." He was considering a $50 million donation to St. Catherine's Hospital. The administration had been courting him for months, sending proposals, arranging meetings, promising that his money would save lives and build legacies. The numbers were impressive. The facilities were state-of-the-art. The staff credentials were impeccable. But Vincent had learned long ago that financial success didn't equal human decency, and he refused to enrich any institution that lacked the most basic quality he valued: compassion for those who had nothing. "The cameras?" he asked, studying his reflection. Maria had yellowed his teeth, added broken capillaries to his nose, created the weathered skin of someone who'd worked construction for 30 years. He looked like a man the world had used up and forgotten. "Positioned throughout the emergency department," Marco confirmed, handing him a pair of glasses with a micro camera embedded in the frame. "Button camera on your shirt, audio recorder in your jacket pocket. 3 team members positioned as visitors and staff. We'll capture everything from multiple angles." Vincent put on the glasses, and the man in the mirror became complete. Robert Miller, day laborer, uninsured, desperate. Someone Sharon Vickers, the head nurse at St. Catherine's, would look at and make a choice about. The choice that would determine whether $50 million flowed into this hospital, or whether Vincent ensured they never forgot the lesson they were about to learn. "Panic signal if you need extraction," Marco added, offering a small device disguised as a button. "Boss, if this gets dangerous..." "It won't." Vincent pocketed the device, knowing he wouldn't use it. He'd survived worse than a nurse's cruelty. He'd been that man once, truly desperate and not in disguise, standing outside a hospital in Naples at 19. And the nurse who'd refused his mother pain medication because they couldn't pay had taught him a lesson he'd never forgotten. His mother had died in agony, while nurses laughed at her begging. That memory drove him still, 3 decades later, testing others to see if that kind of cruelty still existed in institutions that claimed to heal. "If she passes," Vincent said quietly, "if she shows even basic compassion to someone she thinks is powerless, then this hospital gets everything they've asked for. New cancer wing, research funding, equipment upgrades. I'll make them a flagship institution. And if she fails," Vincent's expression hardened, "then I'll make sure every hospital in this region knows what happens when you forget that patients are human beings, not balance sheets." He straightened, feeling the weight of the disguise, the vulnerability it created. The expensive watch was gone, replaced with a broken Timex. His wallet held $40 in crumpled bills and a forged Medicaid rejection letter. Everything about him screamed poverty, desperation, invisibility. He'd become the kind of person society had trained itself to dismiss. Maria stepped back, examining her work with a critical eye. "It's good. Your own mother wouldn't recognize you." Vincent's jaw tightened at the mention of his mother. She'd been the reason for everything: the empire he'd built, the tests he conducted, the line he'd drawn between business ruthlessness and basic human decency. You could be merciless in a boardroom and compassionate in an emergency room. Wealth didn't excuse cruelty to the vulnerable. Power demanded responsibility. His mother had taught him that, and her death had proven it. "Let's go," he said, heading for the door. St. Catherine's emergency department opens in 30 minutes. I want to be there when Sharon Vickers starts her shift. The drive to the hospital was silent. Marco drove, while Vincent sat in the back, preparing himself mentally for what was coming. He'd done this dozens of times. Become homeless, become elderly, become sick, become poor, testing restaurants, hotels, banks, retail stores, anywhere people in positions of minor power made decisions about who deserved dignity. Most failed. That was the truth that haunted him. When given the choice between compassion and cruelty, between seeing someone's humanity or dismissing it, most people chose the easier path. But not all. That's why he kept testing, kept hoping, because occasionally someone would pass, would show kindness to someone who couldn't repay it, would risk something, their job, their comfort, their social standing, to do the right thing. Those people he rewarded, generously, publicly, because the world needed to know that goodness had value beyond moral satisfaction. The others? They learned. One way or another, everyone learned. They parked 2 blocks from St. Catherine's. Vincent stepped out into the cold October morning, and the transformation was complete. No driver, no security detail, no expensive car. Just a man in worn clothes, limping slightly from a back injury he'd genuinely sustained during disguise preparation. Method acting, Maria had called it, approaching a hospital that would decide his fate. Marco's voice came through the nearly invisible earpiece. "We're in position, cameras live, team ready, you're clear to proceed." Vincent didn't respond. Robert Miller wouldn't have an earpiece. He was just a desperate man hoping for help. About to discover whether mercy still existed in modern medicine, he pushed through the emergency department doors at 6:47 a.m., and the test began. Have you ever been judged by your appearance before someone knew who you really were? How did it feel? Drop a comment below and subscribe for more stories about karma and consequences. The emergency department of St. Catherine's Hospital hummed with the organized chaos of a Tuesday morning. Vincent entered slowly, his limp pronounced, one hand pressed against his lower back in genuine discomfort. The waiting area held perhaps a dozen people, a mother with a feverish child, an elderly man clutching his chest, 2 teenagers who looked like they'd been in a fight, a woman with her arm in a makeshift sling. The fluorescent lights were harsh, the plastic chairs uncomfortable, the air heavy with antiseptic and anxiety. Behind the central nurses' station stood Sharon Vickers, and Vincent studied her carefully. She was 48, according to his research, though she looked younger, well-maintained, expensive highlights in her hair, manicured nails, the kind of person who took care of herself. She wore scrubs that were somehow more fashionable than functional, and she moved with the efficiency of someone who'd been in charge for years. Head nurse for over a decade. Salary $95,000. Owned a condo in a nice neighborhood. Divorced. 2 adult children. On paper, successful and respectable. But Vincent had learned that respectability was a mask. What mattered was what lay beneath. He approached the desk slowly, his limp making the journey take longer than it should. Sharon was typing something into a computer, her attention fixed on the screen. She didn't look up immediately, and Vincent waited, patient, observing. Another nurse, younger, perhaps late 20s, with kind eyes and tired features, glanced at him with concern but said nothing. Her name tag read, Leah Chen, RN. "Excuse me," Vincent said, his voice rougher than usual, the accent he'd adopted from construction workers he'd known decades ago. "I need help." Sharon looked up, and Vincent saw the assessment happen in real time. Her eyes traveled from his face to his clothes, to his hands, to his shoes, cataloging everything in perhaps 3 seconds. He saw her expression shift, professional courtesy cooling into something more guarded. "What's the nature of your emergency?" she asked, her tone still professional, but noticeably less warm than when she'd been speaking to the woman with the feverish child moments before. "Fell off a ladder at a construction site 3 days ago," Vincent explained, his hand still pressed to his lower back. The pain was real enough. He'd thrown his back out during preparation, and the discomfort added authenticity to his performance. Pain's getting worse. Can barely walk. I need to see a doctor, get some pain medication, something. Sharon's fingers moved to her keyboard. Name? Robert Miller. Insurance information. Vincent pulled out the forged Medicaid rejection letter with shaking hands that weren't entirely an act. Don't have insurance right now. Got rejected for Medicaid last week, but I can pay something. Got $40. I know it's not much, but... Mr. Miller, Sharon interrupted, her tone shifting further into bureaucratic efficiency. Without insurance, non-emergency cases are lowest priority. Current wait time is approximately 6 hours. There's an urgent care clinic 3 blocks down that might be able to help you faster. 6 hours? Vincent let desperation creep into his voice. Ma'am, I'm in real pain here. I've been working construction for 30 years, never asked for handouts, never been in trouble. I just need help. Just some pain medication and maybe an X-ray to make sure nothing's broken. Sharon's expression didn't soften. I understand you're uncomfortable, but the emergency room is for emergencies. Your back pain, while I'm sure it's unpleasant, isn't life-threatening. We have to prioritize based on severity and ability to pay. That's just how the system works. Vincent noted the phrasing. Not, we have to prioritize based on severity. The "and ability to pay" was the telling addition. He pressed forward, giving her a chance to correct course. Is there anything you can give me while I wait? Even just Tylenol? Something to take the edge off. I'll pay for it, whatever it costs. Medication requires a doctor's order, and the doctor won't see you until you've been properly checked in and triaged. Without insurance verification, that process takes longer. Sharon's attention was already drifting back to her computer screen. You're welcome to wait, but I'd really suggest the urgent care clinic. They're more equipped to handle non-emergency cases for uninsured patients. Vincent saw Leah Chen glance over from where she was organizing supplies. Her expression was troubled, but she said nothing. Not yet. He was. Testing multiple people here, and so far, only one seemed uncomfortable with what was happening. Ma'am, please. He let his voice break slightly, genuine pain mixing with performance. I've been working since I was 16, paid taxes my whole life. I'm not trying to cheat anyone, I just need help. That's all. Just basic help. Sharon finally looked up from her screen, and Vincent saw the irritation clearly now. Mr. Miller, I've explained the situation. You can wait if you want, but you're going to be waiting a long time. We have people with actual emergencies who need attention. I'm sure you understand. The dismissal was clear. Vincent gripped the edge of the desk, partly for support, partly to emphasize his desperation. Can I at least sit down somewhere warm while I wait? Maybe get some water? Waiting room's right there. Sharon gestured vaguely toward the plastic chairs. Water fountains down the hall past the bathrooms. Now if you'll excuse me, I have other patients to attend to. She turned away, effectively ending the conversation. Vincent stood there for a moment, letting other patients see his humiliation, his desperation, his dismissal. The mother with the sick child looked away uncomfortably. The elderly man watched with sympathy, but said nothing. The teenagers were absorbed in their phones. Only Leah Chen met his eyes, and he saw something there, compassion, conflict, the internal struggle of someone who wanted to help but feared the consequences. First wave complete, first chance given and refused. Sharon Vickers had shown discomfort and dismissiveness, but not yet cruelty. Not yet the kind of behavior that would seal her fate. Vincent limped to the waiting area, each step a performance and a genuine struggle, and settled into one of the plastic chairs. The cold from outside had seeped into his bones, and the thin jacket offered little protection. He watched Sharon return to her work, efficient and unbothered, already having forgotten about him. Marco's voice came through the earpiece, barely audible. First interaction recorded. 3 angles. Audio clear. Proceeding to second phase? Vincent gave the slightest nod, invisible to anyone watching. Yes, proceed. Give her another chance. See if she had any compassion buried beneath that professional exterior. See if she remembered why she'd become a nurse in the first place. 2 hours passed. Vincent sat in the uncomfortable chair, his back genuinely aching, watching the ebb and flow of the emergency department. Patients came and went. Some were seen quickly, the ones with good insurance, the ones who looked respectable. the ones whose emergencies were visible and undeniable. Others waited. The elderly man was eventually called back. The mother with the feverish child was seen within 30 minutes. The teenagers were triaged and treated. New patients arrived, were assessed, were prioritized. Vincent remained in his chair, invisible. He watched Sharon. Vickers' work, and what he saw confirmed what he'd suspected. She was efficient, professional, even kind, to certain patients. The ones who looked like they belonged, the ones who had insurance cards and clean clothes, and the markers of respectability. But when a homeless woman came in, clearly intoxicated, with a cut on her forehead, Sharon's demeanor changed. The same dismissiveness, the same cold efficiency, the same assessment that decided this person wasn't worth the same level of care. The homeless woman was directed to wait. She was still waiting when Vincent stood up 2 hours after his arrival and approached the desk again. This time Sharon saw him coming, and her expression tightened with annoyance before he even spoke. "Mr. Miller, I told you. Please." Vincent cut her off, his desperation more pronounced now, his pain more visible. "It's been 2 hours. The pain's getting worse. I can barely stand. Can't you just give me something? Anything? I'm begging you." Sharon's jaw clenched. "And I told you, medication requires a doctor's order. You're going to have to wait your turn like everyone else." "I've been waiting." Vincent's voice rose, and other patients looked over. Good. He needed witnesses, needed people to see what happened next. "I've been sitting here in pain for 2 hours, while people who came in after me got seen. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm just asking to be treated like a human being. Mr. Miller, lower your voice." Sharon stood up, and Vincent saw the shift in her posture. She was done being professionally dismissive. Now she was moving toward hostility. "You're making a scene. If you can't wait quietly, I'll have to ask you to leave." "I'm in pain." Vincent let genuine anguish color his words. "How can I wait quietly when every movement hurts? When I can't afford to miss more work? When I'm just asking for basic help? That's not my problem." Sharon's words were sharp, cutting through the emergency department's ambient noise. Several conversations stopped. Heads turned. "Your poor planning, not getting insurance, not being more careful at your job. That's not my emergency. We have policies here. We have protocols. And those protocols say that non-emergency cases without insurance wait. That's just how it is." Vincent saw Leah Chen step closer, her expression distressed. She opened her mouth as if to say something, then closed it, conflict written across her features. Not yet ready to intervene, still afraid, still weighing the cost of compassion. "I'm not asking you to break protocols," Vincent said, his voice dropping back to pleading. "I'm just asking for basic human kindness. A couple of Tylenol, a warm blanket, acknowledgement that I'm a person who's suffering." Sharon's expression hardened further. "Mr. Miller, I'm going to be very clear with you. This is a hospital, not a charity. We have limited resources, and we have to allocate them based on medical necessity and ability to pay. You don't meet either threshold for priority treatment. Now you can continue to wait, or you can leave and try another facility. But if you keep disrupting my emergency department, I will call security and have you removed. Do you understand?" The threat was clear. The dehumanization was complete. Vincent saw it in her eyes. He wasn't a patient to her. He was a problem, an inconvenience, something to be managed and, if necessary, eliminated. She'd used the phrase, "people like you," without saying it explicitly, but it hung in the air nonetheless. The uninsured, the poor, the desperate, people who didn't matter. "I understand," Vincent said quietly, and he did. He understood exactly who Sharon Vickers was, but he needed to be sure, needed to give her one more chance, needed to see if she was capable of change when pressed. He turned away, limping back to his chair, and heard Sharon mutter something to another nurse. He couldn't make out the words, but he heard the tone. Dismissive, satisfied. The problem had been handled. The inconvenient patient had been put in his place. Vincent sat down, and the cold plastic of the chair felt like judgment. Around him, other patients avoided eye contact. No one wanted to be associated with the man who'd been publicly dressed down. No one wanted to risk the same treatment. The homeless woman caught his eye briefly, solidarity in her gaze. But she said nothing. They were both invisible here. Both decided to be less than human. Marco's voice. "Second interaction recorded. Clear escalation. Medical, legal, and ethical violations documented. Recommend extraction. Vincent gave the slightest shake of his head. Not yet. One more chance. One more opportunity for Sharon Vickers to remember her humanity. One more test to ensure that what came next was deserved. He waited another 2 hours. The pain in his back became a constant throb, no longer just performance. The cold had settled deep into his bones. Hunger gnawed at him. He hadn't eaten since the previous evening, part of the preparation for this test. Around him, the emergency department continued its rhythm. More patients came and went. Sharon Vickers moved through her duties with practiced efficiency, and Vincent watched her carefully. She was kind to a well-dressed businessman with chest pains. She was patient with an elderly woman who had good insurance and a long list of medications. She was professional with a teenager whose parents were clearly wealthy, their concern and entitlement filling the space around them. But when the homeless woman with the head wound tried to approach the desk, Sharon's voice was sharp, dismissive, borderline cruel. "I told you to wait. If you ask again, you'll be escorted out." The woman retreated, blood still seeping slowly through the bandage she'd fashioned from paper towels. Vincent noted it, noted everything, building the case that this wasn't about him, wasn't personal, was about who. Sharon Vickers was when she thought no one important was watching. At the 4-hour mark, Vincent stood again. His legs were unsteady, his back screaming, his desperation no longer entirely an act. He approached the desk, and this time, Sharon saw him coming, and her expression transformed into something beyond annoyance, something approaching contempt. "Mr. Miller, I swear to God!" "Please." Vincent's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried. "I'm not trying to cause trouble. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm in so much pain. I can't take it anymore. I'm begging you. Just something. Anything. I'll do whatever you want. I'll sign whatever forms you need. I'll work it off. I'll clean floors. I'll do maintenance. Just please, help me." He let himself sway slightly, genuine dizziness from pain and hunger, making the performance authentic. His hand reached for the desk to steady himself, and he saw Sharon's face transform from contempt to something worse, disgust. As if his desperation, his weakness, his need were somehow offensive to her. "That's it." Sharon stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Security." Vincent's heart rate increased, though not from fear, from anticipation, from the knowledge that she was about to cross the line from which there was no return, from the certainty that the test was about to reach its conclusion. A security guard appeared, young, uncomfortable, clearly not wanting to be involved. Sharon pointed at Vincent. "This man has been harassing staff for hours. He's disruptive. He's making other patients uncomfortable, and he's refused to leave, despite being told multiple times that we can't help him. I want him removed from the premises." "Ma'am," the security guard said, his voice uncertain. "He looks like he's in genuine pain. Maybe we could—" "Are you a medical professional?" Sharon's voice was ice. "Because I am. And I'm telling you that this man is not a priority patient. He's been told he can wait or leave. He's chosen to stay and cause problems. Now remove him, or I'll call the police and have him arrested for trespassing." Vincent saw other patients watching now, their expressions ranging from uncomfortable to shocked to, in a few cases, approving. The businessman with chest pains nodded slightly, as if Sharon were doing the right thing. The elderly woman looked away, unwilling to get involved. The teenagers were filming on their phones. Good, more evidence. But their expressions suggested they found the situation entertaining rather than disturbing. And then Leah Chen stepped forward. "Sharon," she said quietly, her voice trembling but determined. "He's clearly suffering. I could just give him some basic pain medication. It wouldn't take long, and—" "Nurse Chen." Sharon's voice could have frozen water. "Are you questioning my judgment?" "No, he's been here for 4 hours. He's in pain. We took an oath to help people and—" "We took an oath to provide medical care within the bounds of hospital policy and resource allocation. This man has no insurance, no ability to pay, and no emergency medical condition. Giving him medication without proper authorization would be a violation of protocol. Are you willing to pay for it yourself? Are you willing to take responsibility if he has an adverse reaction? Are you willing to risk your nursing license?" Leah's face paled, but she didn't back down entirely. "I just think we should show some compassion, that's all." Compassion doesn't pay the bills, Nurse Chen. Compassion doesn't keep this emergency department running. Compassion doesn't protect us from liability when someone decides to sue because we gave them medication without proper screening. Sharon turned back to the security guard. Remove him, now. The security guard reached for Vincent's arm, apologetic in his touch, and Vincent allowed himself to be guided toward the door. But he wasn't done. Not yet. One more chance. One final opportunity for Sharon Vickers to show that any humanity existed beneath her professional armor. At the door, Vincent turned back, his voice carried across the emergency department, raw with genuine pain and performed desperation. Please, he said, and the word broke in the middle. I'm begging you. I'm a human being. I'm someone's son. I've worked my whole life. I've paid taxes. I've tried to do everything right, and now I'm asking for help. And you're throwing me out into the cold like I'm garbage, like I don't matter, like my pain doesn't count because I don't have the right insurance card. For a moment, just a moment, Vincent thought he saw something flicker in Sharon's eyes. Uncertainty, discomfort. The ghost of the person she might have been before years of bureaucracy and budget concerns and difficult patience had hardened her into someone who measured human worth by ability to pay. But then her expression hardened again. And Vincent knew. The test was over. The verdict was in. Sharon Vickers had failed completely, definitively, irredeemably. Get him out of here, she said to the security guard. Then, turning to Leah Chen, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. And Nurse Chen, if you ever question my authority again, you'll be looking for a new job. Do you understand? Leah nodded, tears in her eyes, and Vincent memorized her face. She'd tried. She'd risked something. Not everything, but something, to show compassion. That mattered. That would be remembered and rewarded. The security guard escorted Vincent outside, apologizing quietly. Sorry, man, I don't make the rules. I know, Vincent said, his voice still rough, still in character. Not your fault. Outside, the October air was cold, and Vincent stood on the sidewalk for a moment, letting the performance end. Letting the reality of what had just happened settle over him. He'd given Sharon Vickers 4 hours and 3 chances to show basics, human compassion. She'd failed, every single one. More than failed. She'd escalated from dismissiveness to hostility to active cruelty. She'd threatened a nurse who'd tried to help. She'd had him physically removed for the crime of being poor and in pain. The test was complete. The verdict was delivered. Now came the judgment. Vincent walked 2 blocks to where Marco waited in the sedan, and as he slid into the back seat, he began the transformation back. The glasses came off first, then the jacket, then the careful peeling away of the makeup that had added years and hardship to his face. With each piece removed, he felt the power returning, the vulnerability shedding like a costume after a performance. Except it hadn't been entirely a performance. He'd felt it. The cold, the pain, the humiliation, the dehumanization. He'd experienced what it was like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be treated as less than human because of how he looked and what he could afford. And that experience, that genuine taste of powerlessness, fueled what came next. Show me everything, he said to Marco, and the tablet was handed over immediately. The footage was damning, multiple angles, crystal clear audio, timestamps proving the 4-hour ordeal. Sharon's face was visible in every frame. The assessment when he first approached, the dismissal, the escalating hostility, the contempt. Her words were captured perfectly. That's not my problem. Your poor planning. This is a hospital, not a charity. People like you. The threat to Leah Chen, the order to have him removed. And then there was Leah herself. The footage showed her glancing over repeatedly, her distress growing, her internal conflict visible. The moment she'd stepped forward to help, knowing it could cost her. The tears in her eyes when Sharon had threatened her job. The compassion that had persisted despite the risk. 2 very different people, Marco observed quietly. 2 very different choices. Vincent nodded, his jaw tight. Sharon Vickers revealed exactly who she is. Someone who measures human worth by insurance cards and bank accounts. Someone who enjoys the power of saying no to desperate people. Someone who threatens anyone who shows the compassion she's incapable of feeling. And Leah Chen? Leah Chen tried to do the right thing despite the cost. That's who she is. Vincent set down the tablet and reached for his phone. Get me everything on Sharon Vickers. Financial vulnerabilities, professional history, previous complaints, anything we can use. And get me everything on Leah Chen. I want to know her situation, her struggles, what she needs. Marco was already typing on his laptop. On it. What's the timeline? 24 hours. I want Sharon Vickers to have one more normal day, one more morning of believing she got away with it, one more shift of treating patients like balance sheets, and then I want her world to end. The investigation took 6 hours. Vincent's team was efficient, thorough, and had access to resources that made background checks look like child's play. By midnight, he had complete dossiers on both women, and what he found confirmed everything. Sharon Vickers, head nurse for 12 years, salary $95,000, owned a condo that was underwater on its mortgage, $40,000 in credit card debt, son in college with tuition bills mounting. Divorced 3 years ago, bitter custody battle over assets. Professional records showed efficiency and cost-cutting measures that had saved the hospital money, and 3 formal complaints about patient mistreatment, all dismissed by administration because Sharon was too valuable to lose. The complaints were telling. A nursing mother denied a private room to pump breast milk because she didn't have premium insurance. An elderly veteran refused pain medication because his VA coverage was too complicated to process. A disabled patient mocked for needing extra assistance because we don't have time to coddle people. Each complaint had been filed, investigated superficially, and dismissed with the justification that Sharon was following hospital policy and managing resources appropriately. But the pattern was clear. Sharon Vickers had been failing this test for years. Vincent had simply been the first person with the power to hold her accountable. Leah Chen's file was different. 29 years old, night shift nurse for 3 years, salary $68,000, supporting an elderly mother with dementia, student loan debt of $120,000 from nursing school, lived in a small apartment, worked extra shifts to make ends meet, volunteered at a free clinic on her days off. Her professional record was spotless, multiple commendations for patient care, glowing reviews from doctors and patients alike, 2 instances where she'd advocated for uninsured patients and been reprimanded for overstepping boundaries. She was everything Sharon Vickers wasn't, compassionate despite personal struggle, willing to risk something for others, still believing in the oath she'd taken to do no harm and help those in need. She'd tried to help Vincent, knowing it could cost her job, and that act of courage in the face of authority deserved recognition. Vincent made his decisions quickly. Sharon Vickers would be destroyed professionally, financially, and reputationally, permanently, publicly, as a warning to every other healthcare worker who'd forgotten that patients were human beings, and Leah Chen would be rewarded substantially, publicly, as proof that compassion had value beyond moral satisfaction. By dawn, the pieces were in motion. Vincent's lawyers had contacted the state nursing board with evidence of patient abuse. The hospital's board of directors had received an anonymous tip about Sharon's pattern of mistreatment. Local media had been sent footage of the incident, edited to protect Vincent's identity but showing Sharon's cruelty clearly. The hospital CEO had received a call from Vincent's foundation formally withdrawing consideration of the $50 million donation, citing concerns about institutional culture and patient care standards. And Vincent had made arrangements to return to St. Catherine's Hospital at 10 a.m. Wednesday morning, this time as himself. He slept a few hours, showered, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and reviewed the plan one final time with Marco. Hospital CEO will be present, Marco confirmed. Sharon Vickers is scheduled for the morning shift. Leah Chen is there. She worked a double to cover for a sick colleague. Media is positioned outside. Our team is in place to document everything. You're sure about this? Going public? Completely sure. Vincent straightened his tie, looking at his reflection. The powerful man looking back bore no resemblance to the desperate patient from yesterday. Sharon Vickers needs to understand that cruelty has consequences, and everyone else needs to see it happen. This isn't just about her. It's about sending a message. What message? That you never know who's watching. That character matters. That how you treat the powerless reveals who you really are. Vincent turned from the mirror, his expression cold and determined. And that some tests, once failed, cannot be retaken. At 9:55 a.m., a black Mercedes pulled up to St. Catherine's Hospital's emergency department entrance. Vincent emerged from the back seat, flanked by Marco and two other security personnel, and heads turned immediately. Even people who didn't recognize him sensed the power, the wealth, the authority. His presence was magnetic and intimidating in equal measure. He walked through the emergency department doors at exactly 10 a.m., and the transformation in atmosphere was immediate. Conversations stopped, patients stared, nurses froze mid-task. And at the central desk, Sharon Vickers looked up from her computer, saw the expensive suit and commanding presence, and her face transformed into professional deference before she even recognized who was approaching. "Mr. Marcello," she said, standing quickly, her voice warm and welcoming in a way it had never been for Robert Miller. "What an honor. We weren't expecting you. Is there something we can help you with? A tour of the facilities? A meeting with administration?" Vincent said nothing at first, just studied her. Sharon Vickers, head nurse, efficient and professional and kind, to people she thought mattered, to people with power and money, and the ability to help or hurt her career, to people who looked like they belonged in her world. He saw the moment she started to sense something was wrong. His expression was too cold, his security detail too intimidating. The hospital CEO was rushing toward them, pale and sweating, clearly having been summoned urgently. Other staff members were gathering, drawn by the unusual scene. "Do you know who I am?" Vincent asked quietly, and his voice carried despite its low volume. "Of course," Sharon said, confusion creeping into her tone. "You're Vincent Marcello. Your foundation has been considering a donation to our hospital. We've been hoping to—" "Do you recognize me?" Vincent interrupted, and he let his voice shift slightly, adding the rough edge he'd used yesterday, the desperate, pleading tone of a man in pain. Sharon's confusion deepened. I'm sorry, I don't understand." Vincent removed his glasses, expensive designer frames, nothing like the cheap ones Robert Miller had worn, and looked at her directly. "Yesterday, around 7 in the morning, a man came to your desk. Poor, uninsured, in pain, begging for help. Do you remember him?" The color drained from Sharon's face in stages. First confusion, then a flicker of recognition, then dawning horror as the pieces connected. Her hand went to her mouth, her eyes widening, her professional composure cracking like ice under pressure. That was you." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "But you looked—" "Homeless," Vincent supplied, his tone still quiet but cutting. "Poor? Desperate? Like someone who didn't matter? Like someone you could dismiss and humiliate and throw out without consequence? I didn't know it was you." Sharon's words came out in a rush, defensive and panicked. "How was I supposed to know? You were dressed like— you looked like an actual—" She stopped herself, but too late. The words hung in the air, incomplete but damning. You looked like an actual homeless person, an actual poor person, an actual nobody, as if those things justified her treatment, as if cruelty was acceptable as long as the victim was actually powerless. "Exactly," Vincent said, and his voice was cold enough to freeze. "I didn't look like someone who mattered to you. I looked like someone you could treat however you wanted because you thought I had no power, no voice, no ability to hold you accountable. That's precisely the point." The hospital CEO reached them, breathless and terrified. "Mr. Marcello, I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding." Vincent didn't take his eyes off Sharon. "I was testing your hospital, testing whether your staff remembered that patients are human beings, regardless of their ability to pay. Testing whether basic compassion still existed in an institution that claims to heal." He paused. Sharon Vickers failed that test, completely, definitively, irredeemably. Sharon was shaking now, her professional mask completely shattered. "It was a test? You set me up? That's not fair. That's entrapment. You can't." "I can." Vincent's voice cut through her protests like a blade. "And I will, because what you did yesterday wasn't about me. It was about who you are, about the choices you make when you think no one important is watching, about the kind of person who measures human worth by insurance cards and bank accounts." He turned to address the growing crowd of staff and patients. his voice carrying across the emergency department. I was that man yesterday. The one in pain, begging for help, being told I didn't matter because I couldn't pay. I felt the cold, the hunger, the humiliation, the dehumanization, and I watched Sharon Vickers make a choice, not once, not twice, but 3 separate times over 4 hours, 3 chances to show basic human compassion, 3 opportunities to remember why she became a nurse. Sharon tried to interrupt, but Vincent raised a hand, silencing her. She failed every single chance, and more than that, she escalated. From dismissiveness to hostility to active cruelty. She threatened to have me arrested for the crime of being poor and in pain. She threatened a nurse who tried to help me. She revealed exactly who she is when she thinks her actions don't have consequences. I was following hospital policy. Sharon's voice was shrill now, desperate. We have protocols about uninsured patients. We have limited resources. I was just doing my job. Vincent turned back to her, and his expression was utterly devoid of mercy. Let me be very clear about something. Policy doesn't require laughter. Policy doesn't require contempt. Policy doesn't require you to treat suffering human beings like garbage. You went far beyond policy into cruelty, and you did it because you could, because you thought I was powerless, because you've been doing it for years to people who had no voice. He gestured to Marco, who handed him a tablet. I had my team investigate you, Sharon. Want to know what we found? 3 formal complaints about patient mistreatment in the past 5 years. A nursing mother denied dignity, a veteran denied pain medication, a disabled patient mocked for needing help. All dismissed by administration because you're efficient and you save money. But the pattern is clear. You've been failing this test over and over. I'm just the first person with the power to hold you accountable. Sharon's face went from pale to red, anger mixing with her panic. This isn't fair. Everyone has bad days. Everyone makes mistakes. You can't judge me based on one encounter. It wasn't one encounter. It was 4 hours and 3 separate chances. And it wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Multiple choices, each one revealing your character more clearly than the last. Vincent's voice remained calm, controlled, which somehow made it more devastating. And I'm not judging you based on one day. I'm judging you based on years of behavior, based on a pattern of treating vulnerable patients with contempt, based on who you've shown yourself to be when you think it doesn't matter. The hospital CEO tried again, his voice pleading. Mr. Marcello, surely we can discuss this privately. Sharon is a valued employee. She's been with us for over a decade. If there were issues with her patient care, we can address them through proper channels. You had proper channels, Vincent interrupted, his gaze shifting to the CEO. 3 formal complaints, 3 opportunities to address this behavior. You dismissed them all because Sharon was profitable, because she managed resources efficiently, because she saved you money. Well, now she's cost you $50 million, because I will never give money to an institution that values efficiency over humanity. He turned back to Sharon, and his voice dropped to something quieter but infinitely more final. You made 6 excuses yesterday and today. Let me address each one. Sharon opened her mouth to protest, but Vincent continued, methodical and merciless. Excuse 1. I didn't know it was you. My response, exactly. You didn't think I mattered. You only show respect to people you recognize as powerful. That's not professionalism. That's moral bankruptcy. If you only treat people well when you know they can affect your career, then you don't have ethics. You have calculations. Sharon's eyes filled with tears, but Vincent felt no sympathy. He'd given her chances. She'd chosen cruelty. Excuse 2. I was following hospital policy. My response, policy required you to make me wait. It didn't require you to be cruel. It didn't require you to treat me with contempt. It didn't require you to threaten me with arrest. You chose to go beyond policy into dehumanization. Don't hide behind rules you weaponized. The crowd around them had grown. Other nurses, doctors, patients, all watching the public dismantling of Sharon Vickers. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked satisfied. Clearly, Sharon had made enemies among her colleagues. Excuse 3. We have limited resources. My response, basic compassion costs nothing. A kind word costs nothing. Acknowledgement of suffering costs nothing. You weren't protecting resources. You were protecting your comfort. You didn't want to deal with me, so you decided I didn't deserve to be dealt with humanely. Sharon was openly crying now, mascara running down her face, but Vincent continued, without pause. Excuse 4. I was protecting the hospital from liability. My response, liability from what? From showing basic human kindness? From treating a suffering person with dignity? You weren't protecting anyone. You were justifying cruelty with bureaucracy. And that's perhaps the most dangerous kind of cruelty, the kind that hides behind systems and policies, and just following orders. He paused, letting that sink in, letting the historical weight of that phrase land on everyone listening. Excuse 5. Everyone would have done the same thing. My response? No, Leah Chen didn't. Leah Chen, your night shift nurse, saw me suffering and tried to help, despite the risk to her job. Despite your threats, despite knowing it could cost her everything, she proved that compassion still exists in this hospital. She passed the test you failed spectacularly. Vincent gestured, and Leah Chen was brought forward from where she'd been standing at the edge of the crowd, her face shocked and tear-stained. She looked terrified, clearly expecting to be fired for her involvement. Excuse 6, please give me another chance. My response, I gave you 3 chances. At 7 a.m. when I first asked for help. At 9 a.m. when I begged for basic pain medication. At 11 a.m. when I pleaded for acknowledgement of my humanity. You chose cruelty every single time. You don't get a 4th chance. You don't get to learn this lesson at someone else's expense. The test is over. You failed. Now face the consequences. Sharon collapsed into her chair, her body shaking with sobs. But Vincent wasn't finished. He turned to address the entire emergency department, his voice carrying the weight of judgment and warning. Let me tell you what I've learned in 52 years of life. Wealth doesn't make you better. Power doesn't make you superior. These things make you more visible. That's all. They're a spotlight. And what that spotlight reveals, what I saw in Sharon Vickers when she thought no one important was watching, was ugliness. He paused, making eye contact with various staff members, seeing the discomfort, the guilt, the recognition in some faces. I've done terrible things in my life, built an empire on decisions I'm not proud of, hurt people who threatened what was mine, operated in moral gray areas that kept me up at night. I'm not a good man by most definitions, but I've never forgotten what it's like to be powerless, to be invisible, to beg for basic dignity and be denied. His voice dropped, becoming more personal, more raw. My mother died in an emergency room like this one 30 years ago. She was in agony, begging for pain medication, and the nurses laughed at her because she couldn't pay. I watched her die in humiliation and suffering because people like Sharon Vickers decided her pain didn't matter. That's why I test hospitals. That's why I test healthcare workers. Because I need to know if that cruelty still exists before I give millions of dollars to institutions that might use it to harm rather than heal. The emergency department was silent now, everyone absorbing the personal history, understanding the weight behind Vincent's actions. Sharon Vickers revealed her character yesterday. She didn't just refuse service, she stripped humanity from someone she decided didn't matter. And she enjoyed it. I saw her face, saw the satisfaction when she had me thrown out. That's not policy. That's not resource management. That's cruelty. And cruelty is the one thing I cannot tolerate in healthcare. He turned back to Sharon one final time. Effective immediately, you're fired. I've filed formal complaints with the state nursing board. Your license will be challenged and likely revoked. I've shared footage of yesterday's incident with media outlets. Your reputation is destroyed. And I will personally, ensure that no healthcare facility in this region employs you. You wanted to gatekeep who deserves compassion. Now you'll learn what it's like to be denied opportunity. You'll learn what it's like when doors close in your face. You'll learn what it's like to be judged and dismissed and treated as less than human. You can't do this. Sharon's voice was hoarse from crying. This is cruel. This is excessive. I made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. This wasn't a mistake, Vincent said quietly. Mistakes are accidental. What you did was intentional, a pattern, a choice, and choices have consequences. You're not being punished for one bad day. You're being held accountable for years of behavior, for every patient you dismissed, for every person you dehumanized, for every time you forgot that your oath was to do no harm. He turned to the hospital CEO, who looked like he might vomit. The $50 million donation is permanently withdrawn. This institution protected Sharon Vickers for over a decade, dismissed complaints about her behavior, valued efficiency over humanity. That's a cultural problem, not just an individual one. Until that culture changes, until you prove that patient dignity matters more than profit margins, you won't see a cent from my foundation. The CEO stammered something about reforms and investigations, but Vincent was already turning away. He'd delivered his judgment, the rest was just aftermath. He gestured for Leah Chen to follow him to a quieter corner of the emergency department, away from Sharon's breakdown and the shocked crowd. She came hesitantly, her eyes red from crying, clearly expecting punishment for her role in the incident. "Leah Chen," Vincent said, and his voice was gentler now, the coldness reserved for Sharon melting into something warmer. "Do you know why I'm talking to you? To fire me?" Her voice was small, terrified. "Because I tried to help you? Because I went against Sharon's orders?" "No." Vincent smiled slightly, the first genuine smile since the test had begun. "To thank you, and to reward you." Leah's confusion was total. "Reward me? For what?" "For being who you are when it costs you something, for seeing a suffering person and choosing compassion over career safety, for risking your job to bring me water and speak kindly when everyone else had decided I didn't matter." Vincent pulled out his phone, showing her the footage from yesterday. "I saw you, Leah, saw your internal struggle, saw you choose to help despite Sharon's threats. That matters. That's what healthcare should be." Leah watched the footage, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't do anything special. I couldn't watch someone suffer like that. It wasn't right." "Exactly. You couldn't watch someone suffer. Sharon could. That's the difference between you. That's why she's being destroyed and you're being rewarded." Vincent put his phone away and looked at her directly. "I had my team research you. I know about your mother, your student loans, your financial struggles. I know you work extra shifts and volunteer at free clinics. I know you've been reprimanded before for advocating for poor patients. You've been passing tests you didn't know you were taking." "I don't understand," Leah whispered. "I'm establishing a scholarship in your name, the Leah Chen Compassionate Care Scholarship. Full funding for your master's degree in nursing administration, $50,000 signing bonus. And when you graduate, you'll have a guaranteed position as Director of Patient Advocacy at whatever hospital I choose to fund next. Because the healthcare system needs people like you in positions of power, people who remember that patients are human beings, not balance sheets." Leah's legs gave out, and she sat down heavily in a nearby chair, her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. That's not possible. That's too much. I didn't do anything to deserve." "You showed compassion when it cost you something," Vincent interrupted. "In a world that increasingly measures worth by profit and efficiency, you remembered humanity. That deserves recognition. That deserves reward. That deserves to be amplified and replicated and held up as an example of what healthcare should be." He crouched down to her eye level, his voice sincere. "The world is full of Sharon Vickers, people who've forgotten why they entered their professions, people who measure human worth by external markers, people who've let systems and bureaucracy erode their basic decency. But it's also full of Leah Chens, people who still care, people who still try, people who risk something to do the right thing. I test to find both types, to punish one and reward the other, because both consequences matter." Leah was sobbing now, overwhelmed, and Vincent stood, giving her space to process. He turned to Marco, who'd been documenting everything, and nodded. The message had been delivered, the judgment was complete. Time to let the consequences unfold. As Vincent walked toward the exit, he heard Sharon's voice, one final time, shrill and desperate. "This isn't fair. You ruined my life over one day, one encounter. How is that justice?" Vincent paused at the door and turned back, his expression implacable. "Justice is getting what you deserve based on your actions. You showed your character. I'm showing you the consequences. That's not cruelty. That's accountability. Something you should have learned a long time ago." He left St. Catherine's Hospital to the sound of Sharon's sobbing and the stunned silence of everyone who'd witnessed the confrontation. Outside, media cameras were already rolling.
the story beginning to spread. By evening, it would be national news. By morning, Sharon Vickers would be infamous. And by the end of the week, every hospital in the country would be reviewing their patient care protocols, terrified that they might be next.
The ripple effects were immediate and widespread. Within hours, the footage, edited to protect Vincent's identity but showing Sharon's cruelty in stark detail, went viral. Social media exploded with reactions ranging from outrage at Sharon to debates about the ethics of testing people without their knowledge. Healthcare workers across the country weighed in, some defending Sharon's adherence to policy, others sharing their own stories of cruel treatment in emergency departments. But the overwhelming response was condemnation, because the footage was damning. Sharon's contempt was visible. Her escalation from dismissiveness to cruelty was documented. Her threat to Leah Chen for showing compassion was captured. And her excuses during the confrontation revealed a pattern of behavior that went far beyond one bad day. Former patients began coming forward. The nursing mother who'd been denied privacy, the veteran who'd been refused pain medication, the disabled patient who'd been mocked. Dozens of stories, all following the same pattern. Sharon Vickers treating vulnerable patients with contempt, measuring their worth by their ability to pay, using policy as a weapon rather than a framework. The State Nursing Board launched a formal investigation within 24 hours. St. Catherine's Hospital's Board of Directors called an emergency meeting. The CEO issued a public apology and announced a comprehensive review of patient care protocols. 3 other nurses who'd enabled Sharon's behavior were placed on administrative leave. The hospital's reputation took a massive hit, with patients canceling appointments and staff members resigning in protest of the toxic culture. And Sharon Vickers herself, she tried to control the narrative. She gave interviews claiming she was the victim of a cruel test, that Vincent had entrapped her, that anyone would have done the same thing in her position. But every interview made things worse, because she couldn't hide her contempt, couldn't mask her belief that she'd done nothing wrong, couldn't acknowledge that her behavior had been a choice rather than a necessity. Within a week, her nursing license was suspended pending investigation. Within 2 weeks, she was unemployable in healthcare. Within a month, she'd filed for bankruptcy, her mortgage foreclosed, her life in ruins. And through it all, she maintained that she was the victim, that the test had been unfair, that she'd simply been doing her job. She never understood, never grasped that the test hadn't been about one encounter, but about who she was, about the choices she'd made over years, about the pattern of cruelty she'd demonstrated to people she thought were powerless. She'd failed, not because Vincent had set her up, but because, when given the opportunity to show compassion, she'd chosen contempt instead. Vincent watched the aftermath unfold from his office, feeling no satisfaction in Sharon's destruction, but recognizing its necessity. She'd become a cautionary tale, a warning to every healthcare worker that character mattered, that how you treated vulnerable patients revealed who you really were, that cruelty had consequences even if you thought you were protected by policy and position. But the destruction of Sharon Vickers was only half the story. The other half was Leah Chen. Leah's story spread alongside Sharon's, a counterpoint of hope to balance the darkness. Media outlets covered her compassion, her courage, her willingness to risk her job to help a suffering patient. The scholarship in her name was announced publicly, and donations poured in from people who wanted to support healthcare workers who still remembered their humanity. Job offers came from hospitals across the country, all wanting to hire the nurse who'd passed Vincent Marquello's test. Leah handled the attention with grace and humility, consistently redirecting focus to the broader issue of patient care rather than her own actions. She used her platform to advocate for policy changes that protected vulnerable patients, for training programs that emphasized compassion alongside efficiency, for whistleblower protections for healthcare workers who reported abuse. And 6 months later, when she graduated at the top of her class with a master's in nursing administration, Vincent was there. He'd funded a new hospital in an underserved community, and Leah Chen was its first director of patient advocacy, with the power to ensure that no patient would ever be treated the way Robert Miller had been treated at St. Catherine's. "Thank you," she said to Vincent at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, "for seeing me, for valuing what I tried to do, for proving that compassion matters." "Thank you," Vincent replied, For being someone worth rewarding. For reminding me that good people still exist. For passing a test you didn't know you were taking. As for Sharon Vickers, Vincent received occasional updates. She'd found work eventually. Retail, far from healthcare, minimum wage. Her attempts to rebuild her reputation had failed. Her adult children had distanced themselves, ashamed of the viral video that would follow their mother forever. She'd lost her home, her career, her standing in the community. She served as a permanent reminder that cruelty had consequences, that character mattered, that some tests, once failed, could never be retaken. Vincent felt no guilt about her fate. He'd given her chances. She'd chosen cruelty. She'd revealed who she was. And now she was learning what it felt like to be powerless, to be dismissed, to be judged and found wanting. It was poetic justice, harsh, but deserved. 3 months after the St. Catherine's incident, Vincent stood in a different city, in front of a different mirror, watching a different makeup artist transform him into someone new. This time he was becoming an elderly man, trembling hands, stooped posture, the kind of person society had learned to dismiss as past their usefulness. Where this time? Marco asked, resigned to Vincent's compulsion to test, to judge, to hold people accountable. A bank, Vincent said, studying his aged reflection. I want to see how they treat an elderly customer who seems confused. See if anyone shows patience. See if anyone remembers that old people are still people. Marco sighed. And if they fail, then they learn. Vincent's expression was hard, determined. Just like Sharon Vickers learned. Just like everyone learns eventually, because someone has to hold people accountable for who they are when they think it doesn't matter. The transformation complete, Vincent stepped out into the cold morning, becoming vulnerable again, making himself powerless to test whether compassion still existed in a world that increasingly valued efficiency over humanity. He knew most would fail. Experience had taught him that, but he kept testing anyway, kept hoping, because occasionally someone passed. Someone like Leah Chen proved that goodness still existed, that compassion could survive in systems designed to crush it, that character mattered more than convenience. Those people, he rewarded, generously, publicly, as proof that kindness had value. The others? They learned. One way or another, everyone learned. In an upscale bank across town, a manager named Richard Sterling was beginning his day, unaware that in an hour, an elderly man would shuffle through the doors, confused and struggling, and Richard would face a test he didn't know he was taking. A test that would determine his future. A test that would reveal whether he remembered that every customer was a human being deserving of dignity, or whether he'd become the kind of person who measured worth by account balances and dismissed those who seemed like more trouble than they were worth. Vincent Marcello would be watching, recording, judging. And if Richard failed, if he showed the same contempt Sharon Vickers had shown, the same cruelty disguised as policy, then Richard would learn what Sharon had learned. That character had consequences. That cruelty was never truly hidden. That someone was always watching. But if Richard passed, if he showed patience and kindness and remembered his humanity, then his life would change. Because Vincent rewarded compassion as much as he punished cruelty. Because both messages needed to be sent. Because the world needed to know that how you treated the powerless determined your fate. The test was beginning again. It would never stop. Because in a world that increasingly measured human worth by external markers, someone needed to remind people that character mattered, that compassion wasn't weakness, that how you treated others when you thought it didn't matter was the only thing that truly mattered. Vincent had been powerless once, had stood in the rain, desperate and invisible, until someone saw him, truly saw him. That nurse in Naples 30 years ago, who'd brought his dying mother pain medication despite the rules, despite the lack of payment, despite the risk. She'd saved more than his mother's final hours. She'd saved his faith in humanity. And now he tested others to see if that spark of compassion still existed, if that courage to do right despite the cost still lived in people's hearts. Most failed. That was the painful truth. When given the choice between compassion and convenience, between seeing someone's humanity and dismissing it, most people chose the easier path. Most people were Sharon Vickers, measuring worth by external markers, hiding behind policy, forgetting that every patient, every customer, every person was someone's child, someone's parent, someone who mattered. But not all. Leah Chen had proven that. And somewhere in this city, someone else was about to face the test. Someone else would choose compassion or cruelty. Someone else would reveal their character when they thought it didn't matter. And Vincent would be there, watching, recording, judging, because someone had to, because character had to have consequences, because the powerless needed a champion, even if that champion was a man who'd done terrible things in his life, but had never forgotten what it felt like to be invisible. The cycle continued, the tests never ended, and the message remained constant, eternal, universal. You never know who's watching. You never know who's testing you. You never know when your character will be revealed and judged. So treat everyone, with dignity, with compassion, with the recognition that they're human beings deserving of basic decency, regardless of how they look, what they can afford, or whether they can help or hurt you. Because someday, someone will be watching, someone will be testing. And how you treat the powerless will determine everything. Sharon Vickers had learned that lesson. Too late, at too high a cost. But she'd learned it, and now she served as a warning to everyone else. Character matters. Cruelty has consequences. Some tests, once failed, cannot be retaken. Vincent stepped into the morning cold, his disguise complete, his vulnerability authentic, his mission clear. He was testing humanity, one person at a time, holding up a mirror to society and forcing people to see what they'd become. And whether they passed or failed, whether they were rewarded or destroyed, the lesson remained the same. Treat people like they matter, because they do. And because you never know when the powerless person you're dismissing is actually the most powerful person in the room, testing you, judging you, deciding your fate. That was justice. That was accountability. That was the test that never ended, the cycle that continued, the warning that echoed across every industry, every institution, every interaction where power met vulnerability. Be kind, be compassionate, be human, because someone is always watching. And the consequences of failure are real, permanent, and deserved. If this story made you think about how you treat others, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of karma and consequences. Have you ever helped someone without knowing who they were? Or witnessed someone being cruel to a vulnerable person? Share your story in the comments below. Remember, you never know who's watching. Treat everyone with dignity. The test is always happening, and character always matters.